A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you for our broadcast today, where we're building the new media conversation that we all want. And that's a conversation based in reality, based in mutual respect, love for our neighbor. And you can't have love for your neighbor if you don't have freedom of choice. If you can't choose what you're going to do, if you're told you have to stay in lockdown until we tell you to get up, if you're told that you got to have some kind of passport, health passport to watch a ball game with your son, then you don't have the opportunity to be a good neighbor because you have been robbed of your God-given volition. But luckily, we're not going to let that happen under our watch. We're going to fight for our freedom because we are Americans, and that's what we're supposed to stand for. And joining me now is the president of Mises Institute, their website, mises.org. They're the world's premier free market research group and advocacy of a free society. We have now their president, Jeff Deist. How you doing, Jeff?
Good afternoon, David. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I'm great. It's great to hear you on our program as always. And there's a lot of craziness in the news, like always, which makes it fun for those of us in entertainment and media because we get to have lots of fun stuff to talk about. But it's not fun for the folks, and all of us included, who have seen our freedom stripped away. Of course, now they're arguing about how much COVID commie bucks to dole out and when and who's getting what little grub. But as you talk about, you can't print money out of thin air. You can't create wealth out of thin air, more importantly.
No, that's the most important thing to understand is that governments aren't creating new goods and services when they give us bailouts or subsidies or outright monetary checks like they did back with the CARES Act in March earlier this year when COVID was just becoming a big news item, and they sent everybody, a lot of people got $1,200 or thereabouts, and then later on they sent out these loans to employers to keep making their payroll. I mean, all that may appear to resuscitate or boost the economy in the short term, but as grown-ups, we're supposed to think about the long-term effects of things and not just be short-sighted. So, the fundamental understanding, which I think we have to impress upon people in America, is that wealth takes the form of goods and services and happiness. It doesn't, you can't print it. You can't just snap your fingers and conjure it up. So that's sort of lesson number one. But lesson number two is one that we've seen throughout history when governments get too active in financing their own activities through debt by either issuing bonds or simply printing money. Those are the two main ways apart from taxes. So when they issue bond debt, at some point there's no more market for it and interest rates have to rise. And when they print money, all other things being equal, prices tend to rise. So we're in this period now in 2020 where the hole that the Fed had dug for itself back in the 07 and 08 crisis in terms of creating a lot more money, and banks then in turn created a lot more credit, that hole was holding steady, maybe even getting a little shallower by the end of 2019, and then COVID came along. And both Congress and the Fed just said, to hell with it. And we're going to pass a bill that just spends $2.7 trillion without raising it in taxes. And then the Fed said, well, we can match that. We're going to create $4 or $5 trillion of new bond debt that we're going to purchase from banks simply by creating digital money and buying it from them. So that's what they did. So a bunch of banks in the United States effectively got recapitalized. Let's see if they actually use those reserves to then meet their requirements and go out and do any lending. So far, they haven't really been doing that. And the point here is that all this financial engineering doesn't create any real wealth. It doesn't bring any new goods and services into the world. And perversely, it robs people of their savings. When you say, well, there's 2% inflation, David, and we want to have 2% inflation every year, all you have to do is think about applying that to your house, to your real estate. What if government came along and instead of effectively taking 2% of your bank account every year through inflation, they took 2% of your land around your house? well, after 2 years, I'd be 4% and 6% and 8% and so on. And then within just 5 years, you'd have 10% smaller lot.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel about that? I think most people would respond badly to that. So it really is a subterfuge. It's a hidden form of wealth confiscation. And I'm telling you, David, Joe Biden's making an awful lot of promises to an awful lot of governors, to an awful lot of industries like airlines, and to an awful lot of poor Americans about unemployment insurance and welfare programs. So how are we going to pay for it all? They're trying to tell us that this is an outdated, antiquated question, even to ask. And I think that's a very, very dangerous mindset.
Yeah, no wonder Elon Musk is trying to escape to Mars. My goodness, we're in a situation where people want to hit the road, right, and get on out of this mess. Kim Online says, exactly, they're just diminishing the buying power of the money we have in our pockets now. And Jeff, that echoes your point, which is that we are based on, we're in a society where the media massages reality in the service of giant corporations and government bureaucrats. And what happens? They give goodies to the airline industry, goodies to the giant government agencies, and then they say, hey, we're going to give some crumbs to the poor. So there's a kind of an alliance between the crumb coalition. They want their crumbs off the table of the airlines and the big banks, right? So the big banks are going to gorge on the loot that government's going to give. Weekend at Bernie's Biden will give lots of loot to these people, but then they'll brush off their beard, or well, I guess they don't use beards over there in the Davos crowd, but they'll brush off the crumbs off their table, and then they'll say, "Poor people, go pick them up. We got you. We took care of you." And they run and grab the crumbs, and they get mad at the middle class for feeling the pain of all of this, right?
Yeah, it really is an interesting time, and I don't mean to imply that there's no benefit to all of this money creation. There's certainly benefit to people who are earlier in line, what we might call earlier recipients of newly created money and then later on credit. There's certainly benefit to them because they get their hands on the dollars before they're widely distributed throughout society and cause generalized inflation. So, people say, well, there's not that much inflation and inflation's under control. Well, that really depends. In many, many sectors, David, food being a big one, healthcare being a big one, there's been a very serious price inflation over the past, let's say, 5 years. But more importantly, is that consumer prices aren't the only measure of inflation. We can measure inflation by monetary expansion, which I referenced earlier, creating more money. That's a form of inflation, monetary inflation. But there's also asset price inflation. When someone says, well, if a loaf of bread goes up $1, I'm going to notice and grumble and complain and freak out because it went from $3 to $4. But what happens when a stock for a company that hasn't really done anything new or special doubles? What happens when real estate in fancy parts of the country double? All of these things are forms of asset price inflation. So there's more than one form it can take. And when you put it all in a blender and try to understand it, I know that this is not necessarily always intuitive to folks, but when you put it all in a blender, you just have to understand that money isn't neutral. When you create new money, it benefits some people at the expense of others, namely savers and people who are later recipients of the new money. So whether this is intentional or not, you don't have to believe in some sort of conspiracy. It benefits certain groups at the expense of others. And generally speaking, when we say at the expense of others, we're talking about sort of average people without any political pull, people who are not involved in tech, people who are not involved in Wall Street, people who are not involved in academia or media, flyover country people who live more modestly and perhaps rely on their savings rather than their investment portfolio to get them through their later years. So it's one of the oldest tales in human history. But kings and sovereigns have devalued currency. Take a gold coin, that's marked 1, clip a little bit of that gold off, keep it for the king, and still continue to mark it 1, and then put it back into circulation. I mean, that's basically what's happening today.
Wow. Well, we're speaking with Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. Mises Institute, their website, Mises.org. And when we continue, I'm going to ask Jeff about this article on their website. It says, "No privacy, no property. The world in 2030, according to the World Economic Forum." Let's see what their glorious hopes and dreams have in store for us when we return live on A Neighbor's Choice.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187, Equal Housing Lender. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
My name is Abe Lincoln, and I've been thinking there's a website this country needs to know. It's official government information from job listings to student loan applications, and the name of the website is USA.gov. What's a website?
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. A Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm here with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute. Somebody named Googlebot says corn-fed beef tastes better, though. Jeff, is that true? Do you think corn-fed beef tastes better than grass-fed beef?
Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you what. I just want to make sure that I'm not eating the same thing the cows are eating. I want to eat the cows, David.
Yeah, I tell people eat the rabbit, not the carrot, right? That's what we want to promote. And that's what we have to deal with because there's so much misinformation. Why can't Jeff, let me, I'm going to throw one for you. What is the most accurate information that the corporate old media gives? Do they do anything right? I mean, they're wrong on nutrition. They're wrong on economics. They're wrong on foreign policy, wrong on immune system. Can you say what they do really accurate?
Yeah,
Weather?
it's interesting, isn't it?
Weather?
I would say that the stock market quotes in the Wall Street Journal are about it, and of course those are juiced. They're real numerically. I would argue they're juiced by the Fed, but nonetheless, I mean, this is a good question. Where can you go to find the truth? And of course, we're bombarded with so many sources. It's made it actually harder rather than easier to have good information. We live in the information age, but that's the great irony, is that we actually have to work harder than we used to because everything's so corrupted.
Wow, that's true. Well, I want to get to this story here in Mises.org by Anthony Mueller, No Privacy, No Property, The World in 2030, according to the World Economic Forum. And they have this video out, and they say this is the 8 predictions that they have that they're excited about. 1, people will own nothing. Goods are either free of charge or must be lent from the state. 2, the United States will no longer be the leading superpower. Handful of countries will dominate. 3, organs will not be transplanted but printed. 4, meat consumption will be minimized. 5, massive displacement of people will take place with billions of refugees. 6, to limit the emission of carbon dioxide, a global price will be set at an exorbitant level. 7, people can prepare to go to Mars and start a journey to find alien life. And 8, Western values will be tested to the breaking point.
Wow, quite a list. And the question is, says who? I mean, is all this a prediction or is this a directive? It sure sounds like a directive. And let's not kid ourselves. There are certainly people in NGOs, in supranational organizations like the World Economic Forum that meets in Davos. There's certainly a global elite who feel that it is their job and their position in society to dictate the future to us and have us go along with it because they know it's best. I mean, this isn't some sort of pie-in-the-sky conspiracy. This is pretty obvious. I mean, this particular list of demands, predictions, was written back in 2016, so it was describing about 15 years forward into the future. And this is the world they'd like us to live in, where we sort of outsource everything, where we even our apartment and our car and the space we live in is just being used when we're there, and when we're not there, someone else is using it or driving our car or whatever, and we're not consuming much meat. If any, we're living on some sort of carnivores. They try to claim that it's the planet can't. And I mean there's something in human nature, David, which likes to have a little land, which likes to have some possessions, which likes to have the certainty and fulfillment of our castle around us, and it seems like future generations understood this. There was, a long time in British law, was the concept of a man's home is his castle, and from that derives all kinds of principles, including our own Fourth Amendment. And then there's doctrines surrounding property. There's doctrines surrounding stand your ground. There's doctrines surrounding the difference between public and private life. One's personal life. And all this was seemingly understood for many, many centuries, albeit in different forms. But there's a movement underfoot to erase it and to turn us into what to me sounds like a dystopian ant colony, where we're all sort of naked to the world, and we don't own anything, we don't really have any money, and that there's a centralized source for our food and our entertainment and our education and our knowledge and information, our transportation, our housing. It's a very bleak mindset. It denies the individual. It denies the importance of family. Needless to say, it denies the importance of faith, and it denies autonomy. The idea that we are, moral animals with agency and volition, as opposed to automatons which simply respond to stimuli, and if we're herded the right way and given the right food and fed the right entertainment, I mean, it all sounds like Brave New World. And the fact that they're this open about it is, I guess it's shocking. I don't know anymore if it's shocking, but it's, from my perspective anywhere, it's our job to resist this.
Yeah, what did you see that NBC broadcast? They're a state media organ, and Lester Holt did a story the other day about how they're going to have a health passport that's going to have all of your vaccines, and you're a dog, you know. They got your records on there, and you got to scan it to go see the ball game with your child. What do you think of that? You think that's actually going to go through? They always use these little. They said all these stadiums are going to require that to comply with government bureaucrats that want this type of stuff. So they're just going to get ahead of the curve, and you're going to have your little scan, your little QR code to get into the game. What do you think of that?
Well, not only is it already technologically possible, it exists in some form already in China, in the form of a social credit system. And there are individuals right now in China who have a diminished lifestyle in terms of where they can go, certain jobs they can get, certain modes of transportation they can use because of, they've got some black marks on the record in terms, maybe they posted something on social media, maybe they refused to do something ordered by a government edict or whatever. So it's one of these situations where you have to look around and say, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I think that's really where we are with respect to governments in the West today, and their apparently infinite desire to control us and monitor us, and what looks like it might come next is to grade us and use that grade or score to impose boundaries on us. So again, this is the kind of thing that some people want and some people view as inevitable. And I reject that. I don't believe in determinism. I think that we still have a say in our own futures, and I don't want to live in a country with social credit scores, and I don't want to have my passport or my driver's license or some sort of physical chip that's implanted in me to become my identifier, which controls my life. I mean, all this sounds dystopian to me, and I sure hope it sounds dystopian to your listeners.
Remember, Jeff, when all we had to worry about in the good old days was just the little old Patriot Act and all that good stuff? My goodness. Have times changed. But hey, this is an exciting time because it's time to figure out whether people have any confidence and strength in themselves, if they have any love for their human neighbor and their self-dignity, because this is a moment where we're going to see whether people stand up and take back which is theirs, their freedom and their life, or where they shrink into the shadow of an animalistic-like existence, being treated like cattle. Jeff, I appreciate you as always. Thank you for coming to our program.
Thank you, David.
And you can visit Jeff by following him on Twitter, @JeffDeist. On Twitter, that's @JeffDeist. When we return in just a moment, Florida State Representative Anthony Sabatini will join us on what's going on with the threat of lockdowns and what Florida can do about it. Back in a second.
Ronald Reagan would turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about.
A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040, WHBO.
At any time, an FDA panel could okay Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use. Dr. Joni Caldoun with the Michigan Department of Health encouraging people to plan now for how they'll get vaccinated.
Talk to your doctor now about your risk factors and when the vaccine may become available to you.
The latest on the vaccine will be the focus of primetime specials from ABC News this coming Monday on radio and TV. An ICU nurse from Virginia urging people to stay home to slow the spread of the virus.
I go home, I carry it home, I cry a lot. This is real.
And the nurse named Emily was Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's guest at his daily COVID briefing. More than 850,000 Americans filed for jobless benefits last week, with layoffs rising along with virus cases. It was the biggest jump in first-time claims since September. Stocks closed mixed today. The Dow and the S&P lower, the Nasdaq higher. Daria Alvinger, ABC News.
A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and it's exciting to have this time with you as we explore the news with a fresh perspective, a perspective that recognizes the dignity of every human person. That's what's important. If you don't get personhood protected, if you don't care about your life, and then you manifest that self-hate in the way you treat your neighbor with political bad ideas and disgusting, dehumanizing treatment and policies, then that's what you're going to see. You're going to see more misery, more suffering, more unnecessary division and distrust between neighborhoods and communities. And none of that is acceptable in a free society that has prosperity and civilization in mind. You have to be able to have a dignity of the human person. If you don't like yourself, if you hate yourself, and then you manifest that hatred to your neighbor by clamoring for them to be treated like a dog, to have all kinds of, anachronistic or barbaric, heavy-handed policies put onto their back, put onto their neck, just so you can feel better, just so you can feel like you're avant-garde. That's just not a way to live. That is not a civilized way to live life. We cannot allow that kind of culture to manifest more darkness, more self-hatred, because that's ultimately what's going on. The neoliberal left, they feed off of self-hatred. That's why it's all about consumerism. It's all about herd mentality. It's all about desire, lust, envy, covetousness, jealousy. That's all they stoke. And they want people to feel like, oh, you're cool if you fit in with the crowd. You're cool if you go along to get along. That makes you the in crowd. That makes you hip. That makes you, woke is the new term for hip. They can't use the old words because then it wouldn't be hip, right? They always got to come up with another word. And so they always have to try to make it feel like it's a status play that you're going after, that you got to get your status by going along with the crowd, going along with the herd. And of course, they can't tell you that's what you're doing. They have to make it feel like you're cutting edge, like you're sophisticated, like you're, really educated or something. That's why they get the lemmings to say, listen to science. I just trust science. They don't know anything about science. They don't know anything about science. They don't know what science is all about. Science is not about herd mentality. It's about herd immunity, for example. But they don't hear, when they hear herd immunity, they hear, oh, that's not real. They don't even know what the immune system is made out of. They don't know how the immune system works. They just say a sentence, listen to science, and science becomes the big other, the transcendent other, this big other entity that they can subsume their thinking and their critical thinking unto a term. It has nothing to do with real science. They just say the word science. And in this world in which you're supposed to hate virtue and ethics, in which you're supposed to hate Christianity, science has become the big other for a lot of ignorant anti-science folks. And so this big other becomes this kind of symbolic, end all be all, that you say, well, if I say I'm listening to science, then I can say any gobbledygook I want, and it will be accepted as authoritative because I am appealing to the God. When they say listen to science, what they're saying is listen to Odin by the power of Thor, by the power of Horus. That's what they're saying. They're saying, listen to this big other, which I have subsumed my identity under, and therefore I am safe. It's like saying, sanctuary. You run into the sanctuary and you call sanctuary. I'm safe. I'm safe. You can't get me. And that's why they say these words. Like, they get low information people who don't know anything about science. They don't know how the immune system works. They don't know how energy works. They don't know what causes planets to move in space. They don't know anything, but they just say science. And they're like, well, that's authoritative. I've been told on television that science is authoritative. And yes, it's true. Real science is very powerful and very true and very real. But science is not determined by politicians. Science is not determined by rigging the field of what's allowed to be thought about. That has nothing to do with the science inquiry. That has nothing to do with science. It has everything to do with political calculation. People who are do-nothings in politician circles, they've been waiting for the opportunity to take a chance, have a crisis, and use it to become little dictators. That's why we had that Governor Northam of Virginia saying there's going to be a curfew. Curfew for kids and curfew for adults, young adults. Curfew for anybody is stupid. But the anti-Luddite science, the anti-science Luddite mentality of these folks, where they say curfew, night, and people say, oh, I listen to science. No, what you're saying is I listen to Odin, I listen to Thor. By the power of Thor, I go into the house and lock the door from the COVID. I am 20 years old. I'm in great shape. I get a lot of, fresh air, but I'm going to go hide in a curfew from the virus because the power of Thor has been invoked by Governor Northam. That's the level of processing that's going on here. That's going on. And it's not meant to denigrate people who have that mentality. I'm just telling you what it is. It is following the lemming off the cliff. It is a rote motion. It is, you're just going along. That's what's going on with folks. When they say, I am going to be hiding in my house and I'm going to lock the door from COVID because Governor Northam said, by the power of Ra, I command you to stay in your house. That's it. Exactly. A listener said they proclaim science. Kim says, but they can't do basic 101 calculus problem. That's true. They don't know economics. They don't understand supply and demand. They don't understand how price works. They don't understand how the immune system works. They don't understand what we have talked about on this program, that generic antibiotics like azithromycin are very effective at killing the senescent cells, including ACE2 and CD26, which are the senescent cell host receptors, which allows the coronavirus to make a real nasty effect with immune overreactions, immune system overreaction in people who have a lot of senescent cells. Senescent cells are dysfunctional aging cells. You ask these little Luddites that say, I just appeal to science. That's why I voted for Biden. You ask them what a senescent cell is. They don't know what that is. So they don't even know what science is. All they know is to follow the chieftain tribal God who says, I appeal to Thor, stay in your house. And they go, oh, I want to be cool. I'm going to go and do what he tells me to do. That's it. That's all they have. It's the most pathetic, anti-science, religious, pathetic mindset that humans have, which is blind, mimetic nonsense, mimetically walking off into a cliff, mimetically scaring the heck out of kids by keeping them in such an Orwellian nightmare. And then all the garbage they have to watch on, Netflix and all these programs, there's nothing positive. There's nothing diverse. There's nothing creative and life-giving in this mindset. And there's nothing to do with science. I mean, you can't even take basic concepts and say, wait a second, if azithromycin kills the senescent cells, maybe we should do experiments and trials quickly, which should have been done. We were calling for this, almost a year ago. Senescent cells tend to be the host receptor sites for this coronavirus to do a nasty number on people, causing the cytokine storm, causing the increase in lung inflammation. And if you use azithromycin, which has been demonstrated to be antiviral for other viruses and also anti-senescent cells, that could be a very promising place to start for clinical trials. But what's the magic thing that the fake science people who say, I just appeal to science, that's why I voted for a brainless person like Joe Biden. That's because I'm so enlightened, I'm so sophisticated. I voted for a warmongering, mass incarcerating, lying, empty suit like Biden. But you ask them, why don't we get into azithromycin? They'll say, well, NBC told me not to look at that. CBS, they told me not to look at it. Giant corporations with lots of advertisers for big new pharmaceutical drugs told me not to look at generic drugs. They're so stupid. How could you be so dumb? How could you be that ignorant and be an adult? That is the dumbest gullibility I've ever seen. I mean, think about that. They watch these television shows that have 70 drug ads, and they think that those television shows are authoritative about don't look at generic drugs. Nothing to see here. Do not look at generic drugs, whatever you do. And that's not good. That's not good to have that kind of ignorance on such a mass scale, especially when it's weaponized with the ballot box. We can't have that. So let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have someone who's been fighting the Luddite anti-science policies, the lockdowns, State Representative Anthony Sabatini, who's become a national figure in social media because of his radical critiques, or not radical, but bold critiques, I would say, against these lockdown policies. And we're going to get into it with him in just a moment. So stay with us. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Some law firms advertise that they are the largest. In law, largest is not always best. In fact, your case could get lost in the shuffle with one of those very large law firms. Catania are family-owned. They are Tampa Bay's attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case will need a local attorney to get a settlement in your favor. Catania serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm to represent you. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania, putting families first.
Car accident, motorcycle accident? Call the local attorneys today. Catania, offices Tampa. Not an attorney spokesperson.
Before you know it, the NFL season will be ending, the playoffs will be arriving, and the 2021 Tampa Super Bowl will be in sight. This year, we're giving aspiring young kickers from around the world and in Florida the chance to show off their abilities and win 4 tickets to the Florida State Notre Dame game in Tallahassee, scheduled for September 5th, 2021, with $250 spending cash. Visit protogroup.com/Super Bowl to register and find details on how to enter. Parents and legal guardians encouraged to register under 18-year-olds. Winning videos will be streamed on the social media platform Sue, that's spelled TSU, and the overall winner will be announced by a special celebrity guest during our Super Bowl halftime Sue video radio media broadcast on the Riverwalk in Tampa. The winner will be chosen on style points, distance, and unique presentations on how they place the ball over the uprights. Runners-up will receive merchandise from the Hall of Fame, and the most liked entry will receive an extra bonus prize. Register now at protogroup.com/Super Bowl. protogroup.com/Super Bowl. Be a winner at protogroup.com/Super Bowl in association with Sue Social. Social that pays.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Auto Glass America now and fix that pain in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
A Neighbor's Choice returns, and we're broadcasting live across FM and AM on Tampa Bay, Orlando, many other regions around Florida, as well as worldwide on our video live stream and our podcast. Tina says, I feel like I'm living in the middle of a bizarre Coen Brothers movie. God save us. David is a bright light in a currently bleak landscape. So glad I found this neighborhood. Well, we're glad you're here too, Tina. And we're now joined by a state representative in the Florida legislature, someone who's been very vocal and has put his money where his mouth is by doing pro bono work to challenge the anti-constitutional, the unconstitutional lockdown orders here in Florida. We have State Representative Anthony Sabatini. How you doing?
Never been better, David. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great too. And, look, I want to just kind of get an update on a couple things. First of all, last time we spoke, you were saying you were going to be available to try to be involved in the Georgia election issue that was disputing what's going on over there. What's the latest on that? Are you involved at all, or what's going on there?
Well, a lot of your listeners will probably be privy to this because it became a big issue last week, but I was literally in the car on the way up there when I found out that they were basically refusing to complete a real audit. And the now infamous Secretary of State, Raffensperger, or whatever his name is, Raffleson, he refused to allow a more robust audit to take place. They're basically doing a perfunctory, boring counting of the ballots audit, not actually trying to do a signature match. And so myself and probably thousands of other people that wanted to help out were basically made useless by not having that opportunity to help out in that way. So we didn't do anything in Georgia. And unfortunately, they were trying to push a lot of us to go work on the Senate campaigns, which I think is important. I wanted to do that, but certainly not yet. I wanted to help with the recount. So that's kind of where that got left off in limbo, and I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, is there any opportunity for a signature audit at this point, or is that time passed?
In my opinion, nothing is off the table because the legislature could always call a special session and change state laws, including laws regarding if and when a signature audit is appropriate. That could all be done through a special session. I mean, the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the governorship there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to turn a little closer to home for those of us listening in Florida right now on radio. A lot of our listeners in WFLA Orlando, of course, are familiar with what's going on. But Orange County issues first fines of businesses for violating COVID-19 protocols, according to WESH. 2 Orange County businesses have been fined for failing to follow COVID-19 protocols, Universal Hyundai and Hong Fu Restaurant are both facing $300 fines. They are the first two businesses to receive fines after Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings announced last week that the county would be issuing citations to businesses that are failing to enforce the county's mask mandate and social distancing. What's your take on this?
It's an absolute unmitigated disaster. Why the governor is letting these local governments do what they're doing is beyond me. DeSantis has done overall a very good job. And as you may remember, I've sued 16 different cities and counties throughout the state of Florida on the mask mandates. And most of those came to a halt because we're challenging the individual fines, and the governor actually waived, or he issued an executive order which permanently suspended all of the fines. And so either we lose standing or the lawsuits themselves are moved because they cannot issue fines against you. Well, the local governments in the state have basically taken advantage of the governor's order by following the letter of the executive order, but not the spirit of the law, by basically saying, okay, we won't fine individuals anymore, but now we're going to go fine collective entities such as businesses, nonprofits, any public place that's not a person but an actual place can now receive a fine. And that's the problem. It's a loophole that, I had to be fair and say they're right. It was left out of the order, but clearly the Executive Order 2244 was meant to open up the economy and stop the harassment and punishment of citizens who want to move about freely and live their lives. So I've been pressing on the governor through letters and calls to expand the executive order to business entities too, and actually protect all the businesses that want to open. Just yesterday in Orlando, a car dealership and a restaurant both received $300 or $400 worth of fines just because of face mask issues. People coming on the property without face masks. Apparently, they want to make government so lazy that their new goal is to try to turn businesses into the policemen. So if you come on their property and they don't police you like a police officer would, they themselves will be fined. The businesses will be fined and not the person. It's pretty sick and perverse, but that's what's happening. So, at first I thought the governor would have moved and expanded his executive order by now. He's being a little bit hesitant. I'm not really quite sure why, but he is. I think Mayor Jerry Demings, one of the most incompetent county mayors in the country, might be the last straw to break the camel's back, because now that he's arbitrarily harassing these businesses in a devastated economy like Central Florida because of COVID, I think that's going to be the impetus to get the governor to expand his order.
Now, I've seen in a similar line, there's NBC did a little press release, video news report with Lester Holt about this new idea of doing a health passport where you're going to have a QR code, and it's going to have all your little vaccines and everything you need in your little health passport. You got to scan that to get into the ball game. And they're saying this will be in compliance with the expectations of government bureaucrats. So is that going to be another outsourced situation? This stuff reminds me of corporate fascism, where you outsource to private entities to do a lot of bullying and attacks against people's ability to get on with their life. And so if that's the case, what can we do in Florida to stop this?
You are exactly right. And this is where our good friends in Canada, the libertarian movement, liberty-minded Republicans in D.C. think tanks, everything, need to wake up and realize that big corporations and big business can be just a threat to individual liberty and human freedom as big business can in this complex brave new world we're living in. And it's time to start cracking down on what these businesses are now requiring of people. They're the ones that are surveilling people and ignore concerns about privacy more than government is at this point, which is sad. So I've done a bill to take away the government's ability to mandate vaccines during a state of emergency. Just filed that last week. I'm proud of it. Needs to be law. It should be a bipartisan issue. I think it has a chance of passing this year. But more importantly, we also need to pass a law that stops these employers from bullying employees by requiring them, even if they're completely safe, if they're part of the 99.95% or 97% of society that's not at risk for COVID, that COVID will either mean they get asymptomatic or they get cold-like symptoms for a couple of days. making all those people take a risk of getting the virus for something that's not even going to harm them because they're not in the at-risk category is beyond insane and an invasion of privacy, and I think even their just basic due process rights.
So what do you think is going to happen here? Joe Biden is saying he's going to have 100 days of mask mandates. What is that? Is that anything that can have an effect here in Florida from your standpoint?
No. If you look nationwide, if you look internationally, nowhere in the world have masks been shown to help anywhere. They have all these observational studies. If you stand next to somebody and you're wearing a mask, X amount of molecules are going to be coming out at a lessened speed, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, it reduces the amount of it. But that's great that in an observational study, in a one-on-one environment, they can say that masks somehow are going to stop the respiratory droplets from coming within a person, infecting them. But in the real world, when you apply masks to large-scale settings as a public policy tool, it's been an utter failure, a laughable failure. I just saw Tom Woods post today a really nice guide of the Kentucky mask mandate from June until now. So as some people will know, Kentucky's been a statewide mask order. And in a lot of parts of the state, they've had a nearly 100% compliance, plus 90% compliance. People wearing their mask everywhere they go. And what have the results been? Dramatic increases in caseloads every single week and every single month from June until now. It's not even slowing down, and it's worse now than ever. The masks don't work. Same in California. California is now exceeding in death, fatality, hospitalization, and cases Florida at a great rate. They've been on a mask mandate since, I believe, May. Miami-Dade been on a mask mandate since April. They're still the worst in the state, and they've always had the worst rate. They simply do not work. It doesn't work as a public policy tool, and it should be understood as a failure. But because it's become a cult-like obsession with the masks, and it's almost like the old socialists trying to explain communism or whatever. If you try to explain, well, communism's failed here or it's failed there, they always say, well, it just wasn't done right. It wasn't effectively implemented. That's pure communism can never fail. It's the same with the mask now. If the cases are going down, it's got to be because the masks are working. And you've seen these local government entities say, look, there's a decline in cases this 1 month in Nashville or wherever it be. And they say it's because of the mask. But as soon as it turns around and the cases go up, they say, well, obviously people aren't wearing masks enough. So it's just they're stuck in a prism of ideology.
Right. Yeah, it is a prison, but they're not going to be able to manifest this prison into a prison state like they seem to want to, where they can control people and make us little mindless consumers that sit in our house like a bunch of cattle and eat plant-made burgers for the rest of our lives. That's not what we're going to put up with. We're Americans. We can't allow this stuff. We got to be human beings. We got to be able to get out and go to a ball game with our friends without having to worry about some kind of government edict for medicine. So I appreciate what you're doing, Anthony Sabatini. Always a pleasure to hear from you.
Hey, good to see you, David. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Very good. And that's it for A Neighbor's Choice. You can email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.